So today we are going to revise equity and trust and discuss how you should revise and study for your exams in equity and trust to get high grades. Today's topic of revision is non-charitable purpose trust. We do have notes about this topic that you are highly advised to have a look and read it carefully because it summarizes all the important information that you should know about this topic, as well as important case law and principles, and gives you some very, very important exam tips that you should know to get high grades. Today, we're just going to revise very important cases and principles and give you some exam tips as well, but the full discussion is in the notes. Today is going to be just a quick revision, very good to refresh your memory, but it's not enough for in-depth studying and full preparation for your assessment. First of all, I'd like to start with the definition. What is purpose trust and why is it void? We should have a look at this case re-after settlement trust, which is a key case that you should remember about this topic. Express trust, resulting trusts, and constructive trusts are all trusts for ascertainable individuals. Following this, the trust shall generally be declared void by the court where a human beneficiary is unidentifiable. So the main reason why purpose trusts are void is because there is no human beneficiary. There is nobody to benefit from the trust, therefore it should be void. Charitable trusts is an exception to this principle. Charitable trusts may also not have any human beneficiary, but it is still upheld because it's for the charitable purpose. It's for the public benefit. Nonetheless, there are some anomalous exceptions to this principle in relation to non-charitable purpose trusts. So, to summarize, if you see in a trust scenario that there is no human beneficiary, the principle is that purpose trusts are void. So you need to have a look whether or not we can identify a charitable purpose here. If there is a charitable purpose, then you can go through the charitable trust discussion, apply the Charities Act 2011. But if there is no charitable purpose, as per Section 3 of the Charities Act 2003, you should only focus on non-charitable trust discussion and start from the basic principle that all purpose trusts are void. But as we just read, there are some exceptions, and we're going to go through the exceptions. That is the anomalous exceptions to this principle that non-charitable trusts are void. The perpetuity rule is a very important principle that you should learn. The rule against remoteness of vesting. This rule requires a future interest to be vested in a beneficiary within a certain time. So there has to be a time limit, basically. If the property is not tied up in, the property should not be tied up indefinitely in a long-term trust. There is this Perpetuities and Accumulations Act 2009, and the perpetuity period is 125 years. Property must vest within 125 years in the ascertainable beneficiary. So since there is a lack of beneficiary in purpose trusts, private purpose trusts, this could last forever. So the property could be tied up for indefinitely for no human beneficiary. There is one more reason why this trust cannot be held valid. The beneficiary principle. So the beneficiary principle for a trust is that there has to be at least one beneficiary, because the first idea is that the consciousness of the trustee can only be controlled if there are beneficiaries who can bring the trustees to court when the trustees have failed to perform their obligations under the trust adequately. So we have a trust fund, we have a trustee that is managing it, and we have beneficiaries. If there is no beneficiary, then there is nobody to bring trustees into account if they breach the trust. The second idea is that a trust requires that some property be held in trust for some person as beneficiary, such that the beneficiary acquires the proprietary right in the trust property. So the principle is that there must be a beneficiary in whose favor the trust can be exercised by the court. That is why there are only certain exceptions to the beneficiary principle, and the general rule is that there has to be a beneficiary for the trust to be valid. Traditional beneficiary principle, when you're talking about this in an essay question or a problem question, please remember that you should always cite relevant cases. You cannot just define principles without citing relevant authorities, because you need to say where is the definition coming from. For traditional beneficiary principle, I suggest you cite Morris versus Bishop of Durham. Here, every trust must have a definite object. The principle that came out of it is that there must be a beneficiary under a trust, and that class of persons must be sufficiently certain. Law grant provided that there must be somebody in whose favor the court can decree performance. So this is traditional interpretation of the beneficiary principle, and you can cite the case of Morris for this when you write an essay question or a problem question. The approach based on identifying an abstract purpose without any benefit to any person. The re-asset settlement trust, as we at the beginning of our discussion, we also mentioned that this is a very important case, and I suggest that you have a look at this case in detail. Here, a trust was created with the objective of advancing the preservation of the independence and integrity of newspapers. The trust was declared to be a void, non-charitable purpose trust because there was no identifiable beneficiary, and subsequently there was no one who could enforce the trust to enable the court to control and administrate. Therefore, again, this enforces the traditional principle that if there is no beneficiary, then the trust shall be void. Purpose trusts are void. The distinction between people and purpose trust. How do you know that a trust is for people, and how do you know that a trust is for a purpose? A people trust is a trust which benefits unidentifiable people as beneficiaries, as opposed to being focused on achieving an abstract purpose. A people trust will be a valid trust, whilst an abstract purpose trust with no identifiable beneficiaries is void. So is it for the benefit of a human being, or is it for the benefit of some abstract purpose? This is the question that you need to ask yourself when you have a problem question about this topic. Or if you have an essay question, you should make sure that you make this distinction, that if it's a people's trust, it will be held valid. If it's a purpose trust, it will be held void. So what are the exceptions? We already learned that purpose trusts are void. But as we mentioned in the beginning of the discussion, there are some purpose trusts that can be held valid despite the so many cases establishing and supporting this principle that all purpose trusts are void. There are exceptions, as most of the laws in English law. These cases, the exceptional cases, do not obey the beneficiary principle because there is no human beneficiary with locus standi. But the reason why we had to acknowledge this trust is based on concessions to human sentiment, because basically judges decided to allow this trust because there is no harm in it. The exceptions are, for example, the case of Pettingill versus Pettingill. Here, the trust for maintenance of a specific animals was held valid, as it was created to ensure that animals are looked after. So trust for looking after animals can be a valid non-charitable trust. Why cannot it be charitable? Because for a charitable trust, there has to be a public benefit. If you remember, there are two steps for charitable trust to be established. First, it has to fall under section either of the categories in Section 3 of the Charities Act 2011. After identifying the relevant category under Section 3, the second is to show to what extent there is a public benefit. Since animals are not people, there is no public benefit. So the only way to uphold animals' trust is if we have a look at non-charitable trusts and the exception that was already recognized by the courts of England to be a valid trust. Rehupa is also another case that is an exception to this principle that to the beneficiary principle. Here, trusts for the erection or maintenance of graves and monuments, such as trusts for the maintenance of particular gravestones and churchyards, were held valid. So maintenance of graves and monuments can also be a valid trust, even though there is no human beneficiary and there is no public benefit. Byrne versus Keene, trust for religious service in the church, which should otherwise be non-charitable purpose because there is no public benefit, derived from the activity were held valid trust. And finally, Reed Thompson, promotion and furtherance of fox hunting, such as trust to fund the maintenance of a particular hunt from which no specific individuals could be said to derive direct personal benefit. So to sum up, these exceptional cases are trust to maintain animals, trust to maintain graves and monuments, and also this religious services and promotion of fox hunting. If we think about it, it's related to cultural thing and human sentiment, right? So this is what how people live in the UK, and this kind of activities, the court thought that this kind of activities should have trust protection. So since it cannot be charitable trusts because it's there is no public benefit in it, then it could be non-charitable trusts, exceptional cases. I suggest you have a look at our notes for equity. We have notes for all main areas of law, our example essays, our cases, quizzes, flashcards, and tutoring services if you need further support. Our simple study materials is the summary of everything you need to know to get high grades. I suggest that you make use of it as to effectively prepare for your assessments. If the resources are not enough, you should have a look at our tutoring services, and our tutor will be able to help you. We have already helped thousands of law students get high grades. Most of our regular users get a first class, as you can see on our reviews. If you would like to be next student to get a first class law degree, please join SimpleStudying now. Thank you.